quite a lot of bad luck in one season. I got broke into twice, had £15,000 stolen. One year I actually got arrested for breaking into my own apartment. You can't innovate remotely. You can't say what your culture is if you're all sat at home working with pyjama bottoms on and your toast going in the kitchen. Some people say, oh, don't sweat the small stuff. Well, surely that's what quality is. One of our clients said, we actually see ourselves in those designs and that is us. They could just sense it from the concept.
Where do you think it's getting to in the next 25 years?
I still think technology is...
Alex Kerr, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Callum. Thanks for having me. Great opportunity.
Really appreciate it, because obviously we hadn't really connected previous to me sort of shooting you a message.
Yeah, sure.
So really appreciate you coming on. Plenty to dive into today. A couple of obviously notes you made and had a little bit of pre-conversation, sure. But always like to start sort of at the start of your journey, sort of what you got up to when you were younger, school life, and then how you made your way into the construction industry.
Sure. Well, we're a family-run business, and my father set it up in 1986. I've been in and out of the company since I was about 15 years old. School holidays, installing furniture, doing all that side of things, and kind of unavoidable, I suppose, in that sense. But I guess being a family business, it was one of those things where it was always the focal point, I think, within the household as well. I suppose it was quite, I say off-putting, but it's quite full on, you know, having a family business and that involvement and that commitment. And I suppose from my perspective, I was always keen to kind of forge my own path and do something maybe of my own interest. So, and I guess the industry wasn't particularly sexy going back 20 years ago. I mean, blue carpets, magnolia walls, David Brent, Wernham Hogg style offices. Like, do I want that as a career? Not really. But I think things have changed so much in the last 10 to 15 years. I think people's standards have just changed to that level now, not only in fit out, but in just restaurants, shops in general. I just think it's the way that everything's moved on. So I think what it is now as an industry has been really exciting. But from my own perspective, I spent 6 years back and forth living in Ibiza. So I was involved with the sort of music industry over there and the clubs and the sort of running PR teams. We had our own ticket selling team doing pre-parties and excursions and all that sort of stuff. The clubs worked for a yacht charter company at one point. That was my last job. So that was working in a sales office, big panoramic views of all the super yachts and doing all the day sort of check-ins and those kind of things. And the plan being just to live out there all year round.
Okay.
But I think we had quite a lot of bad luck in one season. I got broke into twice, had £15,000 stolen. One year I actually got arrested for breaking into my own apartment. That was quite a poignant
Break into your own apartment, yeah. Did you? I mean, how did that happen?
So, long story short, there was about 15 break-ins in this apartment block in the space of about a week. And we refused to pay the electricity bill or the water bills or our rent until they put security on, because we'd already been broken into once. And so, long story short, went to get in one night, locks had changed. I'm like, okay. So, come back in a couple of days later, we had our contract, we had our passports, we had head torches, managed to break the back window, climb through. So we're packing all our stuff up and we're loading it all over the back wall into our car in the car park. And I've literally got a widescreen TV carrying over the wall, and now they got security on. They go, hey, got a flashlight. So he's basically said, look, what's going on here? Showed him the contract and the passport, but realised that not everything was quite right. So he said, look, I have to call the police. Police turned up. And they were actually really chilled out at first, because like, well, what's going on? And all of a sudden, a lady comes running down the stairs saying, oh, these are the guys that have been breaking into the apartments. So, of course, they then got us on the floor in handcuffs. I'm then basically having to load, I think, 3 police cars of all our possessions, wash powder, ironing boards, all sorts of stuff that we're trying to take away to live with. And spent the evening in a police cell. Long story short, realised it was a domestic dispute between us and the landlord and let us go. But interestingly, I was in amnesia a week later, and I noticed somebody in the dance floor. I thought, I recognise him. It was a policeman that arrested me. So I can't do. We give each other a big hug. We're buying shots for each other at the bar. Spent the whole night. It was crazy. Yeah,
it's a different environment in the
highs and lows.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's never a middle ground. It's either really up here or it's, you know.
So you were sort of, by the sounds of it, you'd done 6 years in Ibiza, then on the yacht. So you were sort of chasing like a bit of more of like an exciting lifestyle at that point.
I think so. Yeah, I just. I suppose free spirit might be one term that's been used, I suppose, in previous years, perhaps more so before having kids and family and all that stuff. But I just think the atmosphere over there and the people you meet and that kind of mentality towards life is generally quite similar. Although there's people with different walks of life, they all have there for the same sort of reasons in that sense. But I took it seriously. I was learning Spanish for 3 hours a week every week for the winter, during the winter of those years. So trying to get, more involved with the culture, and it did support my kind of growth in terms of one job onto the next and doing bigger and better things every year. But I just think over that time, things changed quite a lot over there, and my partner and I got a bit older, and I still love the island, still would love to get back there in some format, perhaps in the future. But and equally, actually, on that front, the deal with my father was always, look, when you finish, when you come back from Ibiza, there'll be a job here. It might be labouring, it might be site managing, might be whatever it is going to be, but I can't promise you that. But there'll be work to the point where I'd get picked up from the airport in October, take me straight to a site meeting on the way home from the airport, and you say, "Oh, this is going to be your project manager for the job." I sit there, literally suitcase in the back of the car, just trying to get back into it, and I'd be on site on a Monday, and basically running the jobs from there. But I think within that, I've done most jobs in the company, whether it's sales, site managing, labouring, project managing, operations in the past. So I've had quite a good kind of cross exposure to skills throughout the business and job roles. And also the deal with us was always, look, there'll be a job there, but you won't necessarily have kind of support in terms of mentoring or coaching for progression in that sense, because it suited both of us. The job we'd come back to, but equally, if I wanted to go away in the summer, then I could go and still do that and have my lifestyle over there. So that was the deal. Although 2015, my partner and I said, look, let's just commit to the UK, settle over there. So I spoke to my father and said, look, I'm going to be back in the UK now for 5 years, no traveling, no disappearing. I'm going to fully commit to the business, help you grow it, and I'll be here to stay and benefit from whatever you want to try and work with me on. And I've been back 10 years straight now, and yeah, love it. Love the industry, love where things are. It's a lot of change and lots of uncertainty perhaps, and different ideas, concepts and where it's heading. But it's an interesting time to be involved in this sector for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll definitely touch on that, but I just want to hop back because, you've done a period of time where you're sort of going around the world and enjoying your life, safe to stay. And it's such a polar opposite going from that to working in the UK in the office design and build industry. So the decision you made at that point to come back and fully commit must have been a tough one, because I'm not too sure how old you were when you made that decision, but like going from that to that, I would consider at that age, it's like, wow, like I've got all of this previous like lifestyle. I've traveled the world. I've met some amazing people, different cultures. Like I've been learning Spanish, and then to come all the way over here, it must have been a huge decision. So what was the hindering point where you thought, I've got to do it?
I just think I've always been ambitious, I suppose, whether it's in sport or competitive, or want to try to better myself or do whatever I can within my abilities. But I just felt that there's a few of my friends in Ibiza that weren't really going anywhere, and it was all quite samey. And there's definitely a level of people that are real high achievers over there. And I've got some friends that have got some very successful concierge companies and villa rental businesses and this kind of stuff. And they've really stuck at it and made it work. But I think, I guess family life and helping my father sort of make the impact with the business. And I just saw the opportunity to really grow mentally and kind of from that perspective in terms of business and just acumen and network and just the stuff that I felt like I'd kind of plateaued quite a lot over there and wanted a bit of change. And also it was a 5-year timescale on a basis of, well, look, 5 years is a good bit of time for me to help, but equally for me to kind of learn and take stock of where things are and where I want to head. And then we can reassess from there.
You mentioned the growth as well. You must have had some incredible growth. I know I keep jumping back to it, but the traveling around the world and doing that type of thing, because like cultural growth is super important as well, instead of just like business growth and acumen, sort of works hand in hand. So the growth you must have got culturally, doing all the stuff on Ibiza and being on the yachts must work hand in hand now.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's people, isn't it? Being around people, particularly in that environment where it's quite hedonistic and people are out partying on a holiday and those kind of things, you do have some really deep, meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
And I think that bit I did struggle with when I got back, because people are more closed over here in general, or in the UK compared to Spain, perhaps as a generalisation. But I think, I suppose that was one of the main appealing points to me. But I guess that was the thing. I kind of felt I reached that insight there and had a lot of that exposure to different cultures, different nationalities. And then the business side, I was just kind of going around in circles, running my own businesses frantically and stressed out. And I suppose I want to try and really learn more about how to build a business, grow a business, scale it, and all the sort of things that we've put into practice here and been able to achieve in that time, really.
I mean, you're right in terms of the UK being very closed off because, I mean, in terms of cultural experience, nothing like you've had, but I did some traveling through Asia and it's drastically different. Like as I was traveling through there, the cultural difference to the UK is second to none. And when I got back here, I noticed the same. You almost fall into the same trap of doing similar sort of things, and then you're in the same environment, and then things sort of pave their own way, which is just massively different. So it's nice to hear that you've done one side of it extremely well, and then you've been able to bring it over here, because I bet it's sort of changed the way this is probably run, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well, because people often ask about family business and what's it like working with your father and what's the dynamic. But I think there's an element of luck involved in that, in terms of what attributes and skill sets the father and son or the relationship has. Because my father's very entrepreneurial, he's very much the idea guy and goes after it. He's a nightmare in process, but that's where I come in, because I'm very much the sort of leader, manager, processes, systems. So I help kind of form all those ideas into those systems and processes. So we're lucky in that the pair of us have got those kind of opposite skill sets in that sense, or complementary skill sets. It's not always the case. If you've got two that have got very similar ideas and they're conflicting, then it's always going to be a nightmare. But we've always worked very well in that sense. Yeah, we don't always see eye to eye, but I think we understand and respect each other to know where the other one adds insight, if that makes sense, and can benefit from their involvement.
Now, you said earlier you've got the plane back, straight off the plane to site as such. Like, that's mental, by the way, because like I know obviously you've had a slight idea that you might be doing something like this, and you mentioned earlier you were doing a bit of furniture installing at sort of 14, 15. So to go from that lifestyle, fly back, thrusted straight into this lifestyle, with no, like previous mass experience as such, like that's a drastic change. Like, how did you sort of cope with being just thrusted into it and just, do you not get on with it?
Yeah, I guess it was the sort of role I was doing before I left, in fairness. So I guess I'd been in the company on and off since I was 18, I suppose. I was fully employed, and I started working and living in Ibiza when I was 21. So within that 3-year time frame, I'd be doing all sorts of stuff in terms of labouring, site managing. And in those days, it was smaller companies. So a site manager would also be the project manager. And we'd probably only have 1 or 2 jobs on the go at any given time. And it would be a case of find the work, do the work, go on holiday, find the work, do the work, go on holiday. So it was very peaks and troughs in that sense. So I understood how the process worked for us in those days. And from where we were to where we are now, it's a different role. And the site project manager, as it was termed, is not how we operate now by any stretch. So it's a different level.
But I mean, going from it's just like the lifestyle change.
Absolutely,
because you've had like the lifestyle of those 6, 7, 8 years or wherever it was, and then you've come back here and it's just a completely different lifestyle.
Yeah, but do you know what though? Is also as much as it can be quite jarring at first, when I would come back, I would be ready. And I used to love the fact of having that dual life, because you'd have the 6 years of going out there and that sort of freedom in that sense, and the culture and the lifestyle. And then you come back here and it's very regimented. And I'm very kind of organised in that sense. I'm very much kind of focus on my diary every week and plan things meticulously and track all my time and all that sort of stuff. So it does lend itself to that in terms of who I am. And I was generally ready. And also on the other side, I'd be counting down the days to get back out there, but it's also the case of when I come back. So I did like that split. I don't know if I could live all year round. I think that was something else that I found off-putting, I suppose, because friends would generally work the summer season. You only got four months to make decent money, depending on what you did over there. They would then go off and live in Thailand or Asia or wherever they might go, which it was kind of appealing, but I liked the split of the two between there and here. So it worked, it worked in that sense.
How about, coming back, being thrusted into it? I know you mentioned you did a little bit before, a few years before, but you've come back thrusted into it. Being the boss's son comes with a different type of stigma. So like, how did you deal with like the company, outside the company, and people also internally as well, not just your dad, but obviously the other people in here coming back? And because the stigma around it is our boss's son, he's come back, he's going to take over, he's been silver spoon, whatever it is, it's typical, it is what it is. Yeah. So like, how did you sort of like navigate yourself through those relationships, conversations and whatnot? Yeah,
I think there may have been some of those mindsets over the years from some people in the company, but I think over time where I've proven myself and I've, rather than just talk the talk. I've actually gone and achieved certain things, and they can see the things I've put in place. They can see what I've done in terms of the culture and helping the teams and supporting the business, rather than it being about things fed to me in that sense. Then I think people have kind of come on board with it more, I suppose. There might have initially been some of that going on, but it was very much a lifestyle business for years, in the sense of we would find the work, do the work, go on holiday, those sort of things. And we've changed a lot as a business in terms of our model as well. I know that you guys are quite construction focused, which is where we kind of were, I suppose, in that sense. But I think, it's just time served and people seeing the impact that I've made and the caring side of it as well, rather than just kind of sitting back and resting and expecting things to come to me. It's a case of, encouraging others and us all having that combined push to make change and be better at doing these things and moving forward.
So the company, obviously, when you come back after those years abroad, what was the sort of setup? Like, how did it look compared to now? Because obviously you've got beautiful space here and you can tell you guys take super pride in what you do. But you mentioned previous to that it's a lifestyle sort of business. So where was it at that point?
It was a serviced office we were working from in those days. We had a few key accounts. Some of those we had far too much revenue and just a couple. Therefore, there was a bit of risk involved in that. So we've really worked hard to kind of gain new clients and different sectors to balance that out a little bit. We've still got those same levels of turnover in those different areas. We've just built the others up so it's more balanced. But we changed model during COVID. So we had our in-house build team in those days and up until about 3 years ago, which worked in the sense that we were able to really kind of vet the quality levels. Our guys were very much multi-skill set, so they could do the partitions, ceilings, flooring, and all that stuff. They might be slower in certain aspects because of those crossed abilities and skills, but I think it really gave us a very strong repeat business, repeat custom because of that, because they knew what they're going to get every time. And I think because of that, actually, we've taken the difficult route in the sense of a lot of the competition have either come from a design degree, they've got PM experience, they've done the APM qualifications, all this stuff. We've done it the hard way of being on the tools, on the sites, trial and error. But I think within all that, we've all got knowledge. Well, I say all, it's filtered down a bit now, but a lot of our PMs and people in the team have physically built ceilings and partitions and fill the blanks. So we know the kind of the construction elements to it, rather than just how things look great visually and aesthetically. It's actually understanding how that stuff comes together and how it actually goes up. And I think that's the sort of thing, you can't buy all that. I mean, we've had PMs that have worked with us externally on insurance work at one time. It was a flood damaged property. And the PM said, can't you just use fire damage. That was it. Fire savers come out. They've put God knows how many tons of water through the building to try and stop the fire. We then got a lorry turn up with all the replacement plasterboard, and the PM said, couldn't you use the stuff that was up before? I just said, follow me a minute. We've walked down the corner, said, that's it all in there, and pointed at Skip all these little pebbles of plasterboard. But he seriously thought it'd be sheets that come down, we can put it back up, dry it out.
It's never going to work.
That's the point of not being on site and physically doing that stuff and learning it in a textbook and in a college or wherever else it might be.
It's the best way to be, learning on site. So I worked on site previous. I was doing carpentry. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in the the fit out sector, but like more residential carpentry, but understanding everything's pretty translatable, whether it's metal frames, timber or ceilings or whatever it is, it's pretty translatable. So because I worked on site, it allowed me to gain a bit of an understanding when I came into sort of PMing and whatnot. I understand that goes like that, so like this goes like this, and it actually allowed me to gain a little bit more respect, because I'm on a similar type of journey to you in terms of like a family business and similar sort of things, obviously a bit different, but working on site gave me a bit more respect when I came into it, because I was like, okay, he has worked on site before, so he knows a little bit. By no means do I know a massive amount, but he knows a little bit about how it all goes together. You mentioned as well about your PMs. Do you guys usually transition people from site into PM? That's the natural progression.
Yeah, so we've actually got 2 PMs at the moment and a head of projects. Steve joined us as a labourer about 15 years ago, and he took the similar route to myself. So labourer, site manager, PM. He's now just passed his APM level 2. So he's actually fully qualified in it, as well as having the hands-on experience. His knees basically let out. He was determined to stay on the tools for his career, but
It's clinging on.
yeah, he couldn't do it. Rugby injuries and stuff. So we kind of supported him in that route, and he's doing an amazing job. And then Sandra, who joined us as a project admin going back 5 years ago, again was kind of supportive to site managers, all the ordering, processing, and I guess had a different route in terms of her exposure, but certainly had that kind of experience where she was picking things up and observing it rather than just reading it in a textbook and then going straight onto site. So I think both got different routes, and because of that, I've got different, what's the word I'm looking for? Strengths, I suppose, and different things to add, which is a great thing. So yeah,
promoting within is always probably the better shout, because they understand the business, they understand, they've worked there for a long time, and it's probably a nice thing to be able to promote people who have done a good job rather than having to go out and find people out there, because you never know how they're going to come in, you never know if they're going to be able to work with you guys culturally, because doing the physical work is one thing, but also getting along with everybody in the office is something to usually overlook, to be fair.
Absolutely.
When recruiting. You've obviously mentioned a couple of times, about your typical construction, how it was back then. When you came into the company, was there any glaring things that you thought you might be able to improve, or did you have like an idea of where you wanted it to go, or is it sort of suck it and see for a couple of years, see what happens, and then we'll work out from there?
I think it was the process. I think obviously you don't grow to the level of your aspirations, you fall to the level of your processes, and it was very haphazard in how we used to order things, and it was really my father. He was the business with a support team around him who would get passed out different tasks to take on and do it, as opposed to a segmented department or different role specific that would take stuff on. So I think it was trying to get those roles streamlined to where we might wear 2 or 3 hats as opposed to 5 or 6, and start kind of growing that org chart and understanding how we could grow into that kind of that size of business and that scale. And we did have a business coach. I say did. We've had one pretty much the time since I've been back. So we had a guy called Nigel he worked with for about 8-9 years, and he was great at showing us great insight in terms of the finances and the numbers and the metrics and all those things that you can really start to build into the business, and then exactly where you are, what the route needs to be. And I think that was a real turning point for us, and he was definitely a catalyst of that growth and that change as to where we are now.
It's interesting you talk about the org chart, because whilst you were saying that, I was sort of thinking of our situation. It's like a lot of us wear like multiple hats. Like I was speaking with Joe on the way up here about like how many, it's almost like jack of all, master of none. Sometimes I'm like doing this, you're doing that, and you're doing this, and then you're just trying to do whatever it takes to get it done. So it's interesting listening to that. How did you find that transition from going from 5, 6, 7 different hats to just specializing in the 1 or 2, and then allowing other people to flourish in the other ones that you used to wear that you're now not?
Yeah, it takes time, and I think also as well, because you have worn those hats, it is easy to get dragged back into those different elements.
Can you just quickly do that for me?
Exactly. It's QSing or it's pricing or something that comes up. And I think that's a bit of my father's role now, in truthfulness, where his title's founder. Obviously, he's got so many skill sets over all different areas from being in business for 40 years. He does still offer support and guidance in all those different areas. I think it's recruiting people that are smarter than you, better than you, and taking that risk sometimes. You kind of, it's very easy in recruitment to take somebody on when you need them now. It's already too late. You need them 6 months ahead of when you want them or when you need them. And just, I suppose, trust them to do what they're doing and to know that they're going to do a better job and run it the right way and implement the things that need to happen. It's like we've got a safety and environment manager who joined us 2 years ago, and he's brought a hell of a lot of automation into the business. So different platforms where we've got RAMS packs and health and safety stuff set up, and it's all automated. And the time that he's saving doing that, it's actually saved us a part-time role that I thought we would need, because the amount of time he saved himself therefore doesn't need that extra admin support. So again, it's just giving people the objectives on what you're looking to achieve, and for them to then find the roadmap and start taking those things on and owning it. I think also as well, what we have done over the years is I say a mistake, but we've maybe taken on people that are more junior or mid-level, and then you're having to kind of feed them the work and skill them and keep them busy, rather than take the senior person, let them bring all that stuff in, and then and they can support and train the juniors from underneath them, or to recruit those juniors into the business. And so I think would I change our approach in that sense? Probably. I mean, we're looking at maybe more sort of small works as well, because the size of office space is becoming smaller. We're getting a lot of smaller inquiries these days, but because of the way we're set up, we're not the most cost effective. And from our perspective, ideally, we want the jobs that will have a touch point through the entire business, so that we've got better overhead recovery and all this stuff. Well, if we're going against smaller contractors, we're not going to be competitive in that sense for the client, or from our perspective. So if we were to go ahead with that now, it'd be a case of taking on a small works manager. They can then run that department. They can then recruit it and do it properly. Whereas years ago, we probably would have taken on 2 or 3 guys in vans. You've got all the training costs, you've got the SCS cards, all that stuff, and it's bigger risk, bigger cost.
Yeah, bigger overhead as you bring that overhead in with you. You also mentioned earlier that you transitioned into a few different sectors. I don't know if you said it was like hospitality maybe, or sort of schools. Like, what was that like? Because that's a completely different realm once you're going from office to a completely different sector.
Yeah, so I guess we were very much a word of mouth business, or certainly through clients, and I think we were about 80% repeat business.
By the way, that's credit to the company, like hearing that, because if you're 80% repeat, it means you guys are obviously offering a really good service and doing a really, really good job. Yeah,
well, Great Western Railway, I think they were certainly one of the first clients, and they're still a client today that we work with consistently throughout the year, every year. But I think we've made some great clients in the pharmaceutical sector, also in tech, finance. Of course, all these guys were doing well throughout COVID, and we were lucky in a way. And you do make your own luck to a sense, but it was a good benefit to us that we had those kind of key clients in place and those different kind of areas that we were able to kind of support the business with and keep growing and supporting those people.
Yeah, so it's difficult when you're sort of thinking about going into a different sector, because it's almost like we haven't tested it, so we don't know. It's relatively similar in terms of like the concept of it, but you're dealing with different types of people, and there's just differences between it. So you guys obviously done well. I know I said it earlier, but 80% repeat business, that's incredible. Like, word of mouth is like underrated, because you don't have to physically spend any marketing budget on being able to recruit it. So you've obviously done well there. Your business coach that you obviously took on, how has he sort of transformed you guys? Like, what has he sort of brought in with you guys? Like, how did it look before and after? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the accountability aspect of it. Having somebody that's, every 2 weeks checking where you are on things, pushing you for those pieces of information, those dates, whatever it is you've committed to doing. The insights, I mean, he was actually a sales and marketing director at a big pharmaceutical company. They were multinational. They had quite a big team behind him. He had some great insights and experience in terms of the finance side. So I think from my perspective, it was that financial literacy that I benefited from, and just having somebody pull me to the numbers every couple of weeks and really thoroughly pick apart the P&L, the balance sheet, the forecasts, all the KPIs that we've now got, and all the dashboards and things that we've put in place. The boring stuff.
Yeah, well, do you know what? Weirdly,
or do you enjoy it?
Well, I would never class myself as a maths geek or particularly interested in that stuff, but I think reading the information that we now have, which is, I think quite comprehensive for a company of our size, I just find it so comforting, I guess, and kind of insightful as to what tweaks you can make. And you look at someone learning to fly an aircraft, you can't do it without having the optics and all the information within the cockpit. You can't do it. It's like trying to fly a fighter jet with only a monoplane controls. I mean, if you're trying to grow and go fast, you haven't got all the measures in place, you'll come unstuck pretty quick. So, there's still tweaks to be made. It's still an evolving process. But I think I find enjoyment in that stuff. And it's probably one of the things I need to learn to let go a bit more, because I've kind of used it as a learning tool for a long while and to understand it. And I've got that grasp. I think that's where we probably need that kind of FD support, like a fractional FD or something like that initially, just to kind of take that responsibility on a bit more, really.
Tell me about so you mentioned that, like you've gone from, well, the industry itself has gone from blue carpets, white walls, like standard fits 15 odd years ago. Tell me about your experience over the last 15 years, like how the industry has grown. And then after that, tell me a bit about where you think it's going to get to. Well,
I guess years ago, it was always construction. Then it's design and build. Now it's consult, design and build is the term that's being kind of used within the sector. Like I said before, I think people's standards have changed generally. Just look at restaurants now, or supermarkets, or shopping centres. Just that level of design and where things are is changed hugely in that time. And so I think when people are exposed to all that stuff in their day to day, they expect the same from their office. Obviously, there's a whole piece around trying to attracting staff back into the office, retaining staff, and all those things. I mean, from our perspective, we do a lot of work in logistics and industrial units, which they were slightly behind the office market for the obvious reason that it's functional and it's just kind of their main function is getting stuff out the door and shipping products. However, going back to that recruitment piece, if they're trying to take on graduates with marketing degrees, they're not going to want to work in some rundown crummy office, industrial unit, when they got their mates going into some nice high-tech office in the middle of Bristol city centre or somewhere else. So we're seeing a shift in the appetite for the sort of higher end office space within logistics and industrial. So I think that's one of the things that's certainly come into play.
It's a difficult one though, isn't it? Because you think of working in industrial space and whatnot, you would assume that they wouldn't be allocating as much budget towards their office fit out because like their logistics side, so they primarily put it towards that. But you look at the industrial, they're like, are they really going to spend the money that's required to spend to be able to fit out their space to the level that they actually want it?
Yeah, but I think that's when the kind of some of the intangible kind of considerations come into play. I mean, for example, one of our clients a couple of years ago, we did a fit out for Grant Heating, so they do sustainable heating solutions and that kind of stuff. And when they moved over to their new premises, we put in like a games area, so they got table football and darts board and all this stuff. And they've now got a weekly tournament between their warehouse team and the sales team, and they'd never speak before because they were different parts of the business. And now they've actually got those internal conversations going on. They've got a much stronger culture for it. And actually going back to them as well, they were based in Devizes before. When they spoke to their teams around the move over to Swindon, they lost about 4 of their staff members due to the commute, and it just wasn't convenient for them. I think they've won about 2 or 3 of them back now.
Have they? Just
from the level of the office and the culture they've got there and the buzz around the place.
I think it's because, some clients who are spending, hundreds of £1,000s, £10,000, whatever it is, sometimes there's no monetarily return. So they don't see any money coming back. It's more of like a cultural change. So it's like hidden rewards, hidden profits come off it because people are more motivated to work and they get on with team members and, the things come more efficiently. And like you said, like those guys are doing tournaments together, getting on together, and then it leads to just a stronger culture within the company. So because there's no immediate profit that comes back of spending out all that money on your office, it's some people I find difficult. They don't really want to part with the money as such, and it's difficult for them to actually take the plunge and do it.
Absolutely. I think one of the things around our industry is there's too much of a focus around the physical space and the aesthetics behind it, and something that looks sexy as a case study. Yeah, great, it looks good in your portfolio, but what does that really mean to the client? And I think the bit that we're trying to do now is tracking the data in terms of a client's recruitment time, their staff retention rates, pieces on their culture, because at the end of the day, you look at all of a lot of the even on our website, be honest about it and truthful, but you look at the competition's websites as well, as it's all around the visual aspects.
Look at this space that we've created,
and is that really enough to get people back in the office? And I think the problem is that the conversation is still around what needs to happen to the office to get companies and their teams back in the office. But I don't think that's really the right question, because realistically the office space hasn't changed hugely from where it was, but I don't think that's really the problem. The change needs to come culturally around how a business operates and actually making those days of being in the office more meaningful, as opposed to just saying a set, right, you guys are in Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. For what reason? Because you've got tech issues. You've got some of the guys on the screen, some aren't even there. You've got often people turning up and half the office is empty. So it's thinking about things like collaboration days and innovation workshops. So we have open innovation workshops of our team where anyone can come in on a set topic, looking at things like sales innovations, marketing, raving fans, all those kind of aspects. And all of a sudden you've got a real buzz for being here rather than just coming in. And I think also you've got that point of employees saying that they're more effective at home.
Do you think they are? My opinion, by the way, just saying, I don't think they are more effective from a generalistic perspective. You got people who probably are. I can only speak from my experience because I worked from home a little bit. No go for me. I couldn't do it.
I think if you're doing the transactional work, if it's just flying through the paper, that's fine. But if you look at the wider aspect or the wider consideration of a career, are you going to look back on your life when you're reaching retirement to think of how much paperwork you've managed to shift?
Never.
As opposed to actually the relationships you've had and what you've done in terms of meaningful work and you know, the memories of being with other people. I mean, we're relationship creatures. You know, we want to seek out others and be in company, and working at home from your own. I also think that's numbered as well on the fact that AI is coming into play massively, and what that's going to have as an influence on people's workloads.
So do you think they'll start migrating back to the office because those jobs are going to be taken over?
I think so. You know, the innovation, you can't innovate remotely. You can't say what your culture is if you're all sat at home working with pajama bottoms on and with your toast going in the kitchen. You know, you need to be together and to have that sense of who you are and what you're about. Onboarding. You've also got the juniors coming out of university not having experienced the business world and not having that support in terms of mentorship. I mean, we've got one of our designers who's an incredible designer who joined us as a junior straight out of university. But she really had a difficult start because we weren't in the office. Everyone's on lockdown. And so she's remote given these set tasks trying to achieve it. But particularly the design team, they bounce ideas, they're being creative, they're sharing insights. And she didn't have that. So I think it worked during COVID and it's working now mainly for convenience, but I don't think it's optimal in terms of the economy and other metrics. And I just think that will start shifting back. I think that it's leveling out between an employer's demand of having the team here and employees' convenience of being at home. I think the employer needs to change in a sense of making the need to be in the office meaningful and having the right time spent in the office and the right kind of meetings, collaborations and the right sessions. And I think there's a shift in mindset from employees in terms of the hidden aspects of their job role that aren't necessarily on their job spec. They might be an estimator and their job is to go and secure pricing, price X, Y, and Z. The stuff that's not listed on there is how you add to the team's culture, how you support the business in their growth and their ambitions in terms of innovation and changes and insights, and how you have that cross-department mindset and inspiration that you clearly gained from working in the same room. So I think that's where the shifts need to happen on both sides.
But do you think our industry, construction-wise, in the office it requires more in-person collaboration than other industries as such?
There's certainly a level of complexity to it. I mean, if you look at a process map in terms of how an opportunity flows through the business, if it's a case of the sales process followed by design followed by QS, if you're just saying, right, done my bit onto you, where's that overlap of where there's going to be pieces picked up and things spotted that aren't necessarily spotted when it's handed over cold? I just think that's. I mean, we've had definite, issues and challenges that would not have happened had we been here in the office, and that's obviously speaking from our experience. I'm sure it's similar for other industries as well.
Well, I was going to say same with us. I know we're in the same industry, but like there was a teething period as well where, you mentioned there the journey. You've got like stage 1, 2, 3, 4 of the client journey as such, and if you go from 1 to 2 with no handover, then 3 and 4 handover is even more difficult. And then how's 3 going to go back to 1 if they need information? Or it makes it complex. It makes it difficult to take the client on the journey from concept to completion as such. When you guys, like when you've got, say, an inquiry comes in and you're thinking of making your client's space a bit more collaborative, and you're also taking into consideration people coming back to the office, do you have to design it specifically to that client? And then, because you mentioned, I know you track data of people coming back, employment rates, blah, 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 which is really interesting. But I don't actually know anybody else who does that. I might not know, I might be behind a little bit, but it's really interesting to hear that you guys do that. So you obviously take a lot of care in the client's wants and needs, and not just, the aesthetic as such, like the case study. So you do it specific as per client as such. So when a client comes in, inquiry comes in, you research them, their industry, their data, and then you specify it to them.
We do, but not what they think they need. They always come to us and they'll say, right, these are the plans. We're going to put sales here. We're going to put finance over here. This is going to be our breakout space. And they've already got it mapped out in their head as to what's right for them. the benefit of us being involved sooner in that process and understanding their culture, and equally, if their culture is not fully determined, you're never going to maximize the design to suit that culture if it's not fully cemented in that sense. So there's a challenge of when it comes to us quite late and they kind of got heads of terms agreed in a building, they're moving in a set amount of time. It's always a bit, it's a tighter time scale to get those kind of clarifications right in terms of what is right for them. And we go through quite a lot of interviews within their team and workplace analysis on neurodiversity. Have they got people with learning differences that would benefit from certain aspects, or things like lighting or sound, of how it might affect their work life and those kind of things. So there's quite a significant amount of work you can do to get it right. There's obviously a big difference in terms of what that company does, as well as obviously things like finance will need, or accounting will need more kind of private locations, more meeting rooms. But that is changing as well. I think where people are only coming in for, the set days as opposed to the 5-day weeks, that those numbers are decreasing a little bit because of the headcount. But that's certainly an aspect to kind of bear in mind. But yeah, we'll try and actually match that client's culture in a sense of the color palettes, not to be their exact corporate colors, but kind of hints of it, because you don't want something that's too glaringly someone, because that can be off-putting to people and it's kind of a bit in your face. But we've had feedback recently where one of our clients has said, we actually see ourselves in those designs, and that is us. They could just sense it from the concepts, and that's kind of the path that we took them through, and that's how we managed to finalize it. Our design team would do a far better job of talking through how they reach those conclusions and the direction they take, but there's quite a detailed and a thoughtful process as to how they pick those different concepts and alignment for our clients and what it is they need.
It's nice to hear, like you guys obviously take so much pride in your client, and you want to help your client, rather than, there's probably contractors out there that are just, they just want to get the sale, they want to get in there, they want to get out, they want to take their profit, and they don't really care as such as how it's been left.
And I think that's a testament to our kind of previous offering and how we were in terms of our repeat business being 80%. Because for us to do a fit out once every 5 or 10 years, it's bloody hard work to find more of those jobs and restart all over again. And if you can find the right partnership, which is what we call them in the business, and you can be on that journey with them, that's better for everyone, on both sides. And I think also as well, when an office fit out is done now, it's not done because those furniture kind of aspects that can be, interchangeable, or there's more modular kind of setup to things where you're not having to mess around with the structure of the building so much, and therefore it is more future-proofed because things are changing so quickly. Then there is more of a aftercare service and a kind of ongoing support, which is needed and necessary for people to get the most out of that cost, because the numbers are staggering. I look at what it costs to do a fit out these days. You think you could buy a house for that, and not even a decent house. It's a huge commitment.
I think exactly the same. Like, when you take everything into consideration, from like the design, the console, the build, the aftercare, everything that needs to be thrown in, and you look at the contract values. Sometimes I think, Jesus, like it's such a commitment. In terms of financial commitment for that company. So you almost owe them a service to like put your all into it, and like just really deliver them that service, because if they're investing like some hundreds of thousands, like even millions of some people, or pounds into like fitting it out, like it's the value, like you said, you could some of the other things that they could purchase with that money is just like astronomical. So the service like really has to be there. It sounds like you guys have
I think that's where the metrics are useful, because, for example, on average, it's £50,000 to replace a staff member. Well, if you spend 100 grand to fit out and you don't lose any staff, you're cost neutral.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's the argument of a for and against type argument on it.
It's difficult saying that to a client though, isn't it? Because sometimes you feel like that they're going to think you're saying that because you just want the business, whereas you're actually being honest and saying like, like it's actually more cost effective, believe it or not, to do this. It's like I said earlier about the hidden, but not the hidden cost. They don't see any like tangible profit of it, so they can't sometimes wrap their head around the fact that you're actually right. It's
also thinking about things as a long term, a 5 or 10 year investment, as opposed to something that's a a quick 3-year lease, which it might be the case, in which case it can be more functional, it could be more cost effective in that sense, more alignment. But there's also ways of leasing the fit out. So you can obviously put it under a monthly cost, which will come out of a different fund, and therefore it's not eating up capital or cash flow. You've also got things like capital allowances where they can save 20% of the cost of the fit out, again, which is another thing to consider, which is often useful because they've already got that budget, we find, which they've now got another 20% they can maximize and do those additional pieces that they maybe had to cut back on before. So that's also useful.
I mean, we've touched loads on, the current state of the fit out industry, but where do you think it's going to go to, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, like in our lifetime? Where do you think it's going to get to? Because how much it's grown from, even from 2000 to 2024 is drastic. I mean, 2000 was sort of before my time, but looking back, it's a humongous change. Where do you think it's getting to in the next 25 years?
I still think technology is too much of an afterthought, or maybe not enough at the forefront. I mean, if you look at a cinema, for example, you're not going to build the cinema, put all the seats in, all the auditoriums, and say, what screen do we want? The screen comes first. You build it around that, So I think, and that's something that we're trying to do more of, is those partnerships with the AV specialists and to get them involved with the early conceptual stages in terms of the acoustics and all those sides of things. So I think the tech is going to have a big leading part, more so than where things are now, rather than something that's kind of an element of the build. I guess there's that cultural piece of more consultancy and more of maybe a lifelong type partnership or longer term partnership. So if you can have that relationship 6 months to a year before the fit out needs, and then you have that ongoing process of tweaking it, changing it, modeling it. That's obviously the ideal thing from a company's perspective of growing and everything else, but it's also how you offer most support to the client and get the maximum ROI on what it is they're doing.
How about, that's obviously in industry specific where it's getting to, but how about, you guys, what's the expansion plan for you guys? Where do you want to get to?
Well, we've already set up our furniture as a separate offering. So it was always, we started off as a stationery business, and then we got into, and of course in those days, or still now, you'd have boardroom furniture as an element of that catalogue, and we'd go and install the odd boardroom suite and bit of furniture here and there. And a client would say, do you guys do partitions? To which Dad was saying, yeah. And you borrow a mate in a van. And
yeah, we can do.
Exactly, do all that. And it kind of grew from there to where we are now. But what's been kind of quite, I say frustrating, but difficult to hear sometimes, is where furniture has become inclusive or part of our fit out. A client doesn't always understand that we are a dealership and that's what we offer through us. I think they see us as a middle person that goes and finds those costs. And when we've had inquiries from a client 6 months later saying, who do we speak to get more of those desks and chairs from? As in which company?
Yeah.
And we're like, us. So there's something clearly not right in our messaging or our branding that helps them understand that's what we do. So we've now split it to Evolve Furniture, which is something you want to grow in its own right, and try and work with more architects, specifiers, and I suppose maximise our partnership with Herman Miller.
Yeah.
Or Miller Knoll, as they're now called.
Yeah.
So sort of doing more work in those areas.
Do you think that's like a natural progression for a fit out company to go down the furniture route? Because you're not the only ones who, I've spoken to or who I've got a relationship with that they are a fit out by trade, and then furniture seems to be the next progression that they go down. I
think especially now, more so in terms of, look at these kind of meeting pods and the booths and the stuff, which is very much kind of a freestanding element, which a client can then retain and take away with them. It's not so much about the fixtures and the partitions and the stuff that's installed into the building itself. So, and
also furniture costs of a fit out nowadays are staggering. Some of the money that's spent on just the furniture dwarfs so much other packages electrics and mechanical or whatever it is. The furniture costs they seem to be growing. Yeah, and that needs to change as well. You look at the way that furniture's made, just the way it's stitched. For example, you've got a framework of a sofa that will last 25 years, but the upholstery will be done in 10, typically. So if it was made in a way that was kind of zipped and you could change the upholstery and do a maintenance contract on it, and there's also talks in our industry around how you would kind of down spec stuff. So you might initially supply that furniture to a high-end hospitality location or a hotel,
once it becomes a bit tired or out of kind of fashion for that area, you might then regulate it or deregulate it somewhere like a driver's mess facility in like a hospitality area, or sorry, like a transport business or something different in that sense. So it's kind of that circular economy will become more and more of a thing. I think what we're trying to do now is setting targets to have a certain percentage of our furniture being recycled or pre-owned. And so that's something that we're kind of talking about quite regularly in the business and trying to look at what direction we take with that. And also maybe the build kind of route itself in terms of a small plot of land and doing some developments at some stage. My father's got a few premises, this being one of them that he owns, that he's kind of involved with. So it might be the company kind of works hand in hand with that. And that's something that we kind of approach a bit more as well.
Oh yeah, so you buy, you build, then you guys fit out and sort of just circulates around.
I think that's the sort of thing that we've been talking more about, I guess. It's just that, it's that consideration as to what point do things become shiny objects and you try and do this, this and this. At the moment, it's very much a case of splitting the furniture and the fit out as offerings. I think that sort of stuff will become more apparent once the right relationships or partnerships are there and things that we could do as joint ventures and the right locations come up. So it's the sort of thing that conversation is being put to at the moment. But I think also the consultancy piece is the sort of thing we want to start doing more of, working with companies to do more on their kind of employee value propositions, more on their how they function as a business, more on their innovation perhaps, and kind of more involved as to how they operate as a team to get more out of being in the office and being together.
Oh, I see. So you guys are thinking about consulting for companies just primarily on their culture, by the sounds of it. It's really interesting, to be fair. It's probably not something that many people do in the industry. Obviously, you guys got humongous plans going forward. What about like yourself? Like what sort of plans have you got going forward? Because it's easy to talk about the company's plans, but obviously, you know, you sound like you've got a lot going on. So like, what's your plans going forward?
Well, I've got a young family at the moment. So my daughter turns 2 on Friday. The son's a year old a month later. So that balance of family life, and also people say work-life balance. Well, it's work-life integration. It's, you know, it's how you work the two together in a way that you're not having to pay one off against the other. So I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to kind of work towards, and having the opportunity to take a bit more time off.
Do you struggle with the old work-life balance?
I think I grew up with it, you know, so I don't know any different in terms of taking the work home with you.
Yeah.
My partner's, she used to work in a company, actually. She was a labourer and a site worker, so she used to help build the partitions and the suspended ceiling. So she knows a good chunk of the team here and has worked in the business. And of course, you talk with your partner about work anyway. But I think it being a family business is that additional kind of conversation piece and kind of interest in it. And also at family meals, my father and I always talk in business when we're at lunch, because I have interest. We both have interest in it.
It's your lives as well at the end of the day, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I'm similar as well. So we've got family members who work in the business. So like I find a similar thing, like, you know, you get home and you have conversations with brothers and whatnot, and it's, some of it is primarily work related. But if you love what you're doing and whatnot, then I don't really see an issue with that. Because some people see that as an issue because you can't section off work to home. Because I mean, sometimes I get caught in that trap of work life. I'm like trying to experience the life, but like work's in the back of the mind, and you think like, am I enjoying the life side of it enough, or am I not? So like I get caught in between the two, but I just think it's what works for somebody, really.
Yeah, there's also different people's perspectives. You know, some people are more focused on having time to themselves, and others are more about growing things and making an impact in some format. I think for me, it's generally about what we can do to kind of benefit local communities more and more charity type work. So we partner with a company called Buy One, Give One. So essentially they work with about 200 different projects worldwide in terms of providing nets to prevent mosquito bites, those kind of things, access to clean water, buying bricks for schools in Africa, those kind of things. So when we carry out an action in the business, we will donate to one of those projects. Okay. So if we raise an invoice, we'll buy bricks. If we get referred a client, we will plant trees. So that piece in itself is obviously a good deed, and it's the right thing to do in that sense. Obviously there's the commercial aspects of how that will win more business, but the bigger you grow, the more you can do. But what we're finding is the impact that's making on the team internally, and how that kind of just a good feel vibe within the business, and having meaningful work rather than transactional work is a thing. So I think maybe more of that in some context is something that I will try and get more involved with and direct the company in.
Going from, like transactional to meaningful, that's a really difficult transition, trying to integrate it, because there's obviously so many people out there that is just business is a transaction. That's all it is. Let's get in there. Let's do the project. Let's carry it out. Let's get the profit. Let's move on. So to like bring in the meaningful side of it is probably quite difficult for some people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah. And it's not the cheap way always to do it. I think that also that point of our industry in general as well is that kind of focus of getting done, getting paid and get gone.
Yeah.
I mean, from our perspective, there's been times where something's been not quite right in our eyes, not in the client, and we've taken it down and reinstalled it. The client's not even spotted it.
That's probably what separates you guys to the others, because like you said, they just want to get in and get done, whereas you guys are like, do you know what, that's not right. That's not the standard I would want to leave it.
We had a client years ago, and the MD had a fit out done in his premises, and the contractor done a great job. Everything went really well, on time, on budget, but they cracked the window in his office. So every day he sits down in his office and he thinks that bloody crack's still there. And they were going to send someone out to come and fix it, never did. So the next time they need a fit out, they reached out and they got hold of us, and they've missed out on a decent fit out and a good client just because of something as small as a couple £100 to fix a window.
It's the smaller things, isn't it? It's those really fine, that's what they remember. Like they might have, you might have carried out £1 million project, duration, work schedule bang on day by day, budget met. Yeah. You've done everything right, and you've mentioned a tiny crack in the glass that wasn't resurrected or wasn't fixed. Sorry, that's all you remembered by, and then you put to the back of the queue for the next one.
Yeah, it's what some people say. Oh, don't sweat the small stuff. Well, surely that's what quality is.
True.
That is the small stuff. You look at David Brailsford and what he did with the cycling teams, and those 1% increases every week and every month, and what that adds up to. And that's the mindset we have. We did try, and going back to your question, or a few questions back, we try to change too much at the same time, and all of a sudden you're kind of overloaded and you make very little progress in any of it. Whereas now it's very much about those little fractional improvements added up that compound to make a bigger difference overall. And so it's really trying to scale back on what the key objectives are and get those right. I mean, our business plan this year is on 5 objectives and that's it. Whereas before it's been a case of 10, 12, and you get nowhere with it. You get somewhere, but it's not as easy to track it, and it's not as tangible as a sense of getting those priorities right and making really good progress and solid joined effort on it.
Do you think that you've got so many, as a business plan, you've got so many objectives, like you mentioned, you've got 10 or 12 because the industry is ever evolving so quickly. So it's almost like, because we get caught up with like trying to not catch up, but either get ahead or catch up, and then you have these mountain of objectives that you'd like to, how you'd like to develop this sector, or how you'd like to develop this team, or that team, like integrations of softwares or whatever it is. And then it all gets a bit too much, because you're like, we're trying to do all of this so quickly. Like so at some point there's going to be like a sticking point between team members because they can't integrate to that so quickly, or X, Y, and Z. So it's probably easier, isn't it, having just 4 or 5 objectives, working on those, and then the next year you do the next one, taking it slowly as such, rather than just doing everything at once. Because we're sometimes I think like we're trying to do too much at once, trying to develop too quickly, whereas like you just need to.
Yeah, and we still struggle with that at times, but I think we've now got our business plan set up in Asana, so it's obviously automated in that sense, and it's open to the entire business. Everyone knows what the objectives are, and it's actually using it as a reference now. So before we would say, well, let's just do this, or what if we did that, we could fix this, and we just go off and do it. Whereas now it's a case of, okay, we can, but where is it in the context of X, Y, and Z? Well, it's not as busy, it's not as big an issue as that. Okay, well, perhaps we can switch that one out, move that back 6 months if that has to be a priority to get it done now. And so it's using that business plan as a working tool rather than something you set at the start of the year, look at it halfway through and say, not done that, that's miles back, no shit, that's a mess.
Yeah.
And so it's that constant kind of usage of it and development of it.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? We get caught up really and try and develop too quickly, or we developing too slowly. It's like, it's a difficult one to catch.
It's putting the work in at the front end. It's really being clear on what are the right results and the outcomes you want. Because if you've got that right, and to use Simon Sinek's term of why and what you're doing it for, you can then align other smaller actions with those bigger goals. But it's making sure you've got ideally no more than 7 max. I mean, we try and scale back from that, and getting those looked at closely, deadlined, split across the business so everyone's involved and helping out rather than just a few key people that are driving it. And I think that's where you're going to get the most growth and the most kind of steps forward with it.
Yeah. I mean, you guys just coming in here from the offset, obviously you take care of what you do. Like your space is really well put together. It's obviously been extremely thought about. You mentioned earlier as well, as soon as you get clients in the room are actually sat in as such, then they usually, proceed with you guys. So, credit to you guys, credit to you as well, mate. You sound like you've done an incredible job.
Yes.
You really do in terms of your journey. I just want to say credit. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant time meeting you, because from the outset, when I reached out to you and I reached out to some people as well, it seems a bit strange that what you'd consider a competitor, even though we're not direct competitors, reaching out and coming to have a podcast about your guys' business and your journey is a bit standoffish. So I appreciate you coming on and sort of sharing your guys' industry insights, thoughts, and you as a leader as well. You do a great job. You really do. And I think credit to the group itself.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I think also there's a requirement for more of these partnerships in general. It's very kind of old fashioned and dated construction in general, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in these kind of collaborations and partnerships for everyone to learn and share and to help take things forward. So thanks for having me on.
No worries. And funny, just touch on it, I was speaking with Joe as well on the way up here that I've been trying to form relationships with what you would consider as competitors, but not to compete, to work together, because it's nice to have, people on your side as well, because you never know, at some point we might do a business transaction, we might work together on something. I've definitely learnt loads from even speaking to you today. So it's really important to sort of get over that old school narrative of that's a direct competitor. I probably wouldn't speak to them or form a relationship because we're probably going to come up against each other at some point. It's nice to hear you say as well, just put that to the back and try and work with people rather than work against them.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for coming on. Had a brilliant time, and thanks so much.
Thank you.